I would say that with just autism in general, it's a multifactorial trigger or inciting event that brings it on. It's not just like, oh, we've been taking Tylenol and causing all this autism, because you'll have women that don't take any Tylenol when they're pregnant, but yet they do have an autistic child. So I believe there's more to it than what this one study shows, but it is one of those things that as the data comes out, it's like, oh, well, probably we think that this drug that we've claimed is safe is actually probably a little bit more toxic than we think than we thought originally. And going to your other question about like, when people look back on our generation and be like, oh, I can't believe they did this. I think there's going to be a lot of different things that they will say that about. Tylenol is just one of those.
I wanted to talk to you today about several topics. We'll just see what we have time for. All of these topics are outside of my scope of practice, but all of my patients ask these questions. And I feel like for a lot of them, they need more time than what they can get with a primary care provider. And I understand time is limited, so they want to have a long form discussion. And if they don't get that, they're only left with what the algorithm pushes them on social media or whatever political affiliation they have. They pick a news site, and that's the spin that they get. So I want to talk to you today as a physician. I want to start with Tylenol because I felt like that was just a bomb that got dropped on us. And maybe some people feel like they've known about this for quite some time, but I feel like for the general population, it was news. And it's one of those things where I feel like, we look back at previous generations and when they let women smoke when they were pregnant and we could smoke indoors, and we say, oh, it's crazy that people back then didn't realize the potential harmful effects of smoking. But they didn't know. That information was withheld for so long, and we can't really judge them for that. But I wonder how much, is this a scenario with Tylenol where, our grandkids will look back at our generation and say, oh, I can't believe they were just willingly doling this out to pregnant women and causing autism. Is it on that level? And I'm trying to make sense of this just as a parent, but I'm wondering, how do you, because I'm sure you're getting more of these questions than I am. How do you have this discussion? What are your views on it? Was this news to you when the news broke?
I'll answer kind of like, I guess in reverse order, kind of. Probably just answer them as I go through them. But I would say it wasn't terribly a surprise when that information came out. Mostly just with the how Tylenol works, with its mechanism of action. It was more just like, oh, well, I guess it can be that. I would say that with just autism in general, it's a multifactorial like trigger or inciting event that brings it on. It's not just like, oh, we've been taking Tylenol and causing all this autism, because you'll have women that don't take any Tylenol when they're pregnant, but yet they do have an autistic child. So I believe there's more to it than what this one study shows. But it is one of those things that as the data comes out, it's like, oh, well, probably we think that this drug that we've claimed is safe is actually probably a little bit more toxic than we thought originally. And going to your other question about like, when people look back on our generation and be like, oh, I can't believe they did this. I think there's going to be a lot of different things that they will say that about. And Tylenol is just one of one of those. Because I mean, if you think about like just generation before me, probably not even the generation before me, but my parents' generation and their generation before them, you had smoking, you had mommy's little helper, which was Valium that everyone was taking, and everyone's like, oh yeah, everything's great. And then when it actually comes down to, you're like, oh yeah, this actually caused a lot of issues. So I think this is just one of them, and we'll never really know until like a few generations down the road, and they actually can look back at all the different studies. I do think that one thing that's an issue now is just everyone puts all of their, I don't know, all of their thought processes or all of their dependency into research and saying like, oh, research is the answer. So whatever the research shows, that's what's got to be the truth. But I mean, we've seen even from back with tobacco that the research can be changed or altered in order to have what that researcher is looking for be the positive results to kind of get their product on the table. Um, and so, like, where I was going with this, what was some of the other questions again?
Well, I think you kind of answered it, and I think you what you just said is a nice segue into another concern that I have is that because research can be manipulated, there is a lot of political pressure on the Maha movement because they they came out guns blazing, controversial appointments, making a lot of claims. I feel like they can't, at the end of this experiment, they can't just say, well, I guess there was nothing to find. You know, they can't come up empty handed. And they even set deadlines where they're going to find certain things. And I wonder how much of that pressure is influencing the way some of these things are going to be reported, you know, and is the research that strong? Because President Trump came out and said, don't take it. It was very, I mean, he said it multiple times. And I know it's all about publicity and things like that. But it's still, people listen to that. And for me, this is something that I had shared in the preview podcast for this episode is that, you know, I feel like as a parent and someone who's not a physician, I'm looking right now at this rigged sporting event. It's like a tennis match. And on one side, you've got big pharma, and the other side, you've got politics. And I'm on the edge of my seat watching the ball go back and forth, and I'm wondering who's going to win. But they're just volleying. They're not trying. You know what I mean? They're putting on a show because they're very skilled. And I think one's right and one's wrong, but I'm not really sure who. And I'm trying to figure it out to make the best decisions. And it feels like the whole time they're just putting on an act. And so it's hard to like wrap my mind around it because it's one of those things where you think like, okay, there is some research, but can we trust the people who are interpreting the research and giving these recommendations? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think regardless of what side of the fence you sit on politically or where you sit on this issue, I don't think it's hard to see the other side of it to turn around and be like, okay, I can understand the counterpoint to this. Is this something for you, even before this came out with your patients, you know, when there's a fever, were you already giving these warnings in a way, saying like, look, these could be the potential side effects of taking acetaminophen?
I would say that, like, say that I had a patient that called in and said they had a fever, their kid had a fever. My first inclination was not to tell them to take Tylenol or ibuprofen or any of the other antipyretic medications. My approach was, okay, well, your kid has a fever. How are they acting? If they're completely fine and they're playing around doing what they need to do, why try and give them for something that's not really affecting them? Because fever is not something that, let me step back a little bit. So fever is kind of one of those things that everyone is just afraid of now. Like, oh, I have a fever. I need to take something for the fever. Fever is a natural occurrence in the body. It's a natural process of the body trying to fight off an infection. And so why should we take something that is going to disrupt our body's natural processes? And so with me, I only told patients to give their kids Tylenol, ibuprofen, or a couple of the like herbal things if they didn't want to do those to begin with. I had them take those only if the patient was symptomatic, or like I really am having a hard time with like muscle aches, body aches. I just feel terrible. It's not necessarily the fever itself that I was treating.
Yeah.
Um, and even then, I would say don't try to take this regularly. Try to take a little bit of it, because I mean there is the concern of the main concern that I would tell them was that Tylenol can be toxic for the liver, and so you don't want to overload the liver by taking too much Tylenol, and that would be my approach. And just kind of going into Tylenol itself, especially with Trump saying that oh don't take it at all. I think that was just more just Trump showboating and just trying to do his thing with it. He's just very verbose with what his talks are. So you had him saying don't take Tylenol, and then you had a bunch of his political opponents that were basically taking Tylenol on camera and basically like, see, it's fine, I can take this. And it's just like, well, yeah, if you take a one-time dose of Tylenol, it's not that big a deal. If you take a lot of Tylenol at one time, or if you're taking Tylenol continually, that's where the issue is. And it's not from the Tylenol itself, I would say. I would say it's more the metabolites of Tylenol as it's
Mm.
broken down. I don't know, and this is something that not a lot of people know, but Tylenol is broken down by the liver. That's why there's the concern of liver failure, but it's not necessarily that it's damaging the liver, but it has a metabolite called N-acetyl P-benzoquinonamine. It's a very long, complicated name. They shorten it down to NAPQI. And this metabolite is actually very toxic to the system. It's a very small amount of what Tylenol is broken down to, but this metabolite, it uses up a lot of the uh, glutathione. Sorry, I forgot the word real quick. It uses up a lot of the glutathione. Glutathione is an antioxidant compound that's made by the body, and it binds up these toxins, or what are called reactive oxidation species, and it pulls them out of the body through the liver in order to help in order to help these things from kind of these inflammatory things from accumulating inside the body. I can't see inflammatory, toxic chemicals from accumulating in the body. And so if you're taking a lot of Tylenol, if you're taking Tylenol pretty regularly, you're using up your body's own glutathione stores. And so that's kind of where the issue comes in, because if you're using up all your glutathione, then you're not able to bind up all of these chemicals and pull them out of the system. And the NAPQI, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, and it also crosses the placental barrier. So if you're getting a build of this in the system, you're affecting both your brain and a fetus if you're a pregnant woman.
Hmm. Well, when it crosses the placental barrier, do we know, or do we have any idea of the mechanism that could influence autism? Or is it just an association right now?
So the thing with autism itself, autism has been found to be that it's a neuroinflammatory disorder. So it comes on from inflammation in the brain. Typically, it's like you don't see like adults that suddenly get autism. It's typically when people are kids and they still have that developing brain.
Hmm.
I would compare it similar to a concussion. If you have somebody that's concussed and they're not responding, or they're well, not responding. If they're not recovering from that concussion, that's when you see more long-term effects from the concussion itself.
Hmm.
So
So yeah.
if you have repeated like inflammatory processes that are going on in the brain, then you can cause more long-term damage to the brain.
Okay. So that makes sense. How strong, in your opinion, is the association?
With Tylenol autism?
Tylenol and autism.
Again, I think one thing that they're not doing in the research studies is they're not testing to see how much Tylenol is too much Tylenol,
Hmm.
and there's not going to be a study that comes out with that, because with research nowadays, they're not going to approve of a research study that could potentially cause damage. That's a big thing with research, and I don't know if you've been involved with research at all, but whenever like you have to get research approved by an IRB, or an
Hmm.
institution that has a research section of it, and with these IRBs, you have to prove that what you're studying will not cause undue harm to the person. And so if you're saying like, oh yeah, we're going to give Tylenol and see if it causes autism, that's never going to come up.
Yeah, I think we run into similar issues with studying in orthopedics, like disc injuries. You can't just take a bunch of people and say, we're going to try and rupture a disc, you know? So it's interesting because we're limited on research, which is good in a way because we have ethics. We're not going to just try and induce harm on people, but also the limited science leaves a lot of questions. And to your point, we may never know, but future generations probably will figure this out. But in the meantime, let's say you've got a patient and she's pregnant and she has a fever, and she says, I don't want to take Tylenol, but I'm concerned because this fever is getting really bad that the fever itself might have an effect on my baby. What are the risks of high fever when someone's pregnant? Like if a high fever goes unchecked in the mother, what's the risk to the baby?
Yeah, so I guess the main point I need to like high fever, that's at varying degrees because a fever is any temperature over 100.4 degrees. And so are we looking at like 100.5 or are we looking at like 103, 104 fever itself? I would say that as far as a mother having a fever and the effects on the baby, not as significant because the fetus is surrounded by an amniotic fluid. That amniotic fluid kind of preserves and kind of regulates temperature around the baby a little bit more. So mom's temperature is going to affect how mom's feeling, but it may not necessarily affect how the baby's feeling.
Okay. So the mom's body is incredibly adaptable to protect the fetus. So unless it's a fever above a certain level, and you don't have to give that number, but you're probably not going to be as concerned. If a woman is pregnant and let's say she calls you and she reaches a fever level that concerns you, and she still doesn't want to take medication, what are some options that she has?
Okay, so this is where I will go actually to a little bit more of uh, like a more herbal approach. So I really like turmeric. Turmeric's a natural anti-inflammatory, anti-fever medication. It's what first thing I give to my kids if they're just saying that they're achy and they happen to have a fever at the same time. Because again, a lot of the symptom of a fever shouldn't be like, oh, I just like I have a fever, but I have nothing else. It's like typically they're like, oh, I hurt all over, I'm really achy, and it's just like, well, the turmeric can actually help bring those symptoms down and have you more comfortable while your body's just doing its natural processes. If we're trying to just bring a fever down because somebody has a fever, then like I said, you're inhibiting the body's natural processes, and you can actually prolong the the symptoms or the disease because you're keeping the body from being able to do what it needs to do.
Interesting. Beyond turmeric, is there anything else between, let's say, turmeric and Tylenol that people can do if let's say they're beyond incredibly uncomfortable and they're worried, whether the worrying is justified or not? You've got someone, I joke about my wife, and I don't think she minded me sharing the story. When we had our second child, she got a pretty bad fever. And when an infant's sick, stress goes up for the parents, and I was a little bit less stressed, but she can't sever that connection of holding a newborn baby who's screaming. And so she had me call the pediatrician, and I talked to someone, and they were talking about our options and things. And my wife, she had seen something on Instagram about the potential for kids swallowing multiple magnets and then they get caught. And I don't know in her brain how it got connected where that could be associated with fever. But to me, standing there as not a mother, in that moment, a little bit more clear-headed, like we don't even have magnets in the house. So I don't know where they would come from. And even if they were in there, she doesn't have an issue with pooping. I didn't see that association, but for her, she made me get on the phone with the pediatrician and ask if there's a potential that she swallowed 2 magnets. And I had to do it with a straight face.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like on the other end of the phone, they were just trying to be polite, because they didn't realize that I also kind of thought it was silly. But it wasn't silly to my wife. In the moment, we had a baby with an extreme fever. Stress was high. She had a fear that she had swallowed 2 magnets. So if you get someone who comes to you or calls you, one of your patients, she's either pregnant, let's say she's pregnant and she is worried whether it's justified or not. She tried the turmeric, it doesn't work, doesn't want to take Tylenol. Are there any other really good options for people out there who may be in that scenario?
So, yeah, so I mean, turmeric. If the turmeric doesn't work, they really don't want to take Tylenol. You can say you can consider taking like a small amount of ibuprofen, if you want to go into the pharmaceutical route. A lot of I would say like this pregnant mom who has a fever doesn't want to affect her child. I've kind of reassured her as best I can. Um, and if she's is potentially dealing with a potential mom brain, like this is like her second or third child or fourth or something like that, and it's just the rationalization isn't really there too much. I mean, I can tell them ibuprofen. I can tell them like, well, if you don't want to take this, just put ice bags in your armpits, ice bags on the back of your neck,
Okay.
ice bags in the groin, because that's going to try. Those are the connections to the kind of more the central part of the body to kind of bring temperature down and get people a little bit more comfortable.
That's logical. I think that's a really good explanation or a good recommendation. Because I mean, that's what you do if you had heat stroke. That's one of the things.
Yep.
They're overheating. It's life threatening potentially unless you lower their temp. Why not? Ice is usually readily available, or an ice bath or something like that. I think that's interesting. So I think. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, just for one thing, like typically if I try to gauge the fever. So if I have somebody say they have 104 fever or higher, that's relatively high. You do maybe not at risk for like a fetus at that, but you do have a risk of just inflammation of the brain and brain damage from a fever going that high for too long.
Yeah.
And so those are ways that can bring it down. So that's kind of my gauge. If they're saying, like, if it's a mom saying that she's 102 fever and she just doesn't want to take anything and she's really worried about it, that's when I say, like, well, you're only at 102. It's not that big of a deal right now.
I think maybe I'll try and summarize everything. There's what you said. There's nuance essentially, and I think when people hear the president talk or someone from Maha get up there, or they see something on Instagram or Facebook, there's no nuance. It's all about clickbait, get your attention. There's usually some type of fear mongering, and I'm not even going to say that they have bad intentions, but they're trying to get your attention and they're trying to be provocative in a certain way. So I think people hear those things and they see those things, and then they think, well, this is either good or it's bad. It's either right or it's wrong, and which one is it? And I think what you're saying, if I'm understanding, is that there's nuance to it. It's like Tylenol isn't necessarily going to cause autism, but there are risks associated with every medication. And there are other options besides medication. And even within the concept of having a high fever, well, how high is the fever? You know, what's the actual risk to the fetus? What's the risk to you and to your brain? These are all questions that are important to answer before someone can make an informed decision. And I feel like it's nice to hear a physician be able to talk about some of these things, because for most people, this conversation that we've had right now that's been going on for about 20 minutes is exponentially longer than someone's going to get with a physician face to face.
Yeah.
So I would hope that if anyone's watching this or listening to this, that this is reassuring, or at least gives you more information so you can ask informed questions and get to it with the limited time you have with a physician. But I don't know, how much time do you, for your, I mean, this is probably a loaded question because I'm sure it varies, but like for your typical primary care visit, do you have enough time to have these conversations with people?
I intentionally make my schedule so that way I can have time with patients. I think that with the way the medicine is, they're shortening these visits too much, and you have like maybe 10 to 15 minutes to for your appointment, but you're only talking to your doctor maybe 5 minutes out of that. So my shortest appointment is 30 minutes. For the
Um,
most part, if I have a new patient coming in that has a lot of things to talk about, I'm going to like an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, depending on like what they're coming in with. So I dedicate my time to doing that. That's one of, I don't know, I'm a direct primary care doctor, so I don't deal with insurances. And because of that, like I get to choose how long I get to spend with patients. And I'm very much in line of educating my patients so that way they understand what's going on with their medical problem before they leave the clinic, and they can actually take control of their health a little bit better.
well, that's good to know. I think a lot of people have trouble deciding who they want to see or who they want to choose as a primary care physician. And it's interesting because I had a conversation, it was a couple years ago now, a friend of mine, we were talking about healthcare and he was asking me about what I did, and I was kind of explaining the way I think about things, and I spend more time with patients than I think people in my profession do. And I had made a comment about, I feel like at least in the chiropractic world, the concept of continuing education is not taken seriously. I just have to go to a conference, a 3-day conference once every 2 years, and I don't have to pay attention, and I'm essentially good. And I take continuing education more seriously than that, and I'm trying to update my information. But a lot of people don't because they don't have to. And he was like, well, how would someone who's not a healthcare provider know then? How would you make that choice to know who's the best provider for you, whether it's chiropractor, physical therapy, a physician? And no one had ever asked me that question before. And I honestly didn't have an answer for him. It's been a couple of years, and my answer to that has been evolving. But I wonder, you practice different than most physicians who I know. If someone is out there and they're asking you that question, hey, say I'm in Hillsdale,
Mhm.
I'm trying to make a decision. I have some options for primary care providers. What's your opinion? If someone's trying to assess whether someone's got up to date information and there might be a good fit to work with them, what are some ways that someone could assess a healthcare provider?
Oh, yeah, that's a difficult question because yeah, not every physician practitioner does the same thing. Um, I guess the a good first initial question is how long will my appointment be? Because if they say, oh, if you're a new patient, you get a 30-minute visit, then you're probably not going to be able to spend that much time with the doctor. If it's a follow-up and it's 15 minutes, then it's the same type of thing. But if you say like, yeah, I'm a new patient, how long's my appointment? And they say, oh yeah, well, it'll be an hour long, so you can talk to the doctor. Like that's going to give you a little bit more of inclination, like, oh, this person might actually sit and talk with me. The other thing was you just have to talk to other people in the area. So if like say you just moved to the Hillsdale area and you're trying to find a good doctor, you got to ask around and be like, how much time do you get to spend with your doctor? That's probably the number one thing to ask them.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think that's, I think probably when I talk to people who are frustrated with not getting results with healthcare that's insurance based, that is probably one of the number one complaints. I never have time. I spend more time with the nurse, or I spend more time with an assistant, or I spend more time in the waiting room that I do face to face with the doctor. And, they want more than that. And I think it's important for people to understand that there are other options out there. There are cash-based providers who step outside of that system specifically to be able to offer those services. And I think it's rare in a lot of healthcare professions, but I think it seems to be more rare in yours. Maybe it's my ignorance, but I very rarely run into a physician who doesn't bill insurance. Is it becoming more common, or are you just kind of a rare breed
Uh,
nationally?
I would say that it's becoming more common. I'd say even in the past like 5 years or so, there's been a pretty decent increase in the number of people having these cash-based or direct care practices,
Mhm.
and it's mostly due to physicians being tired of going through the insurance hamster wheel, where you have to like just get insure authorization for insurance to be able to do anything. Um, like yeah, I still have to deal with insurance a little bit. So if I order a medication or something like that, the insurance will say like, oh well, we don't want to approve of this. Why don't you do this one instead? I'm like, well, because I want to use this one, it's going to be more effective. Um, but the practice itself is becoming more common. I would say in more rural areas, it's going to be harder to find. But if you were to go to like Chicago, New York, Detroit, you're going to have several of those there. But I would say we are this type of physician. We probably only make up like maybe 5% of the total like in hospital not of the total like physician practices in the United States.
And you do primary care for adults. You do some pediatric stuff. You do orthopedics,
Mhm.
right? You
Yeah.
offer kind of a wide variety of services. So I think that's an interesting thing because I think it's also kind of rare because the way I had read, and I read an article one time and it described it as, I think they call it the shopping market effect. So if someone, it's like going into a chip aisle and trying to decide which bag of chips, but there's 1,000 options. Like, how do you make that choice? And obviously picking chips is not that crucial, but even if you say, well, we're going to have Mexican food, I'm going to get tortilla chips. How do you make that, you know, how would you make the right choice for you? And it's kind of a silly analogy, but from a healthcare perspective, if you have something going on, you have to pick a specialty on your own
Hmm.
for the most part. And then within that specialty, well, that's not even say specialty, you have to pick a profession. So, am I going to go, do I need a physician? What kind of physician? Uh, what kind of background? And it's hard because basically a person has to make a choice with very little information, and the choice they make could determine the outcome of whatever it is they're dealing with. And that's on them with no information. And it's kind of neat to be able to walk into a place and say, I have a problem. And then, like a practice like yours where it's like, well, we have different options and we can assess that problem and tell you, we don't just have one hammer, to hit everything with. We're going to look at it from a different perspective if we need to.
Hmm.
Is that an accurate way to kind of describe the way you're setting up the way you practice? Because it seems like you're adding providers and you've got more than just primary care.
Yes, yes. So we have more than primary care and sports medicine, non-operative orthopedics. A lot of that just comes from I would say just another more kind of like rarity with me is that I have different specialties. So I'm triple board certified in internal medicine, sports medicine, and osteopathic neuromusculoskeletal medicine. So with those certifications, I bring all of those to the table, but that's not something that you're going to get in your regular like primary care office. You're going to get somebody that's a family medicine doctor. That's typically what it is because internal medicine's basically shifted over to the hospital.
Mm.
Um, but the reason I want to try and get so many things under one roof is because people hate having to see multiple doctors. Um, I I I have several patients that come in. They're like, I've seen all of these different specialists. They haven't given me any benefit. Um, and really, medicine itself has moved into more of a specialty care type of field, where your primary care doctors aren't the ones controlling everything. They are the ones that are referring you out, and the specialists are actually the ones that are taking care of your health. It used to be that you went to your primary care doctor, they handled a lot of things on their own, and then if it was out of their wheelhouse, like I don't really know what's going on here, I'm going to send you to the specialist. They sent you to the specialist. Specialist gave a diagnosis, gave the recommendations, and then sent you back again. And now it's like, well, the specialist is just going to take care of everything and it's going to do all this stuff for you. Um, and I just with the way that I practice medicine, the way that I was taught it, because I mean, different medical schools, different residencies will do all this type of stuff. I went to medical school in West Virginia, and I did a lot of my rotations out in West Virginia. And West Virginia is very rural, And so a lot of times I was with doctors that they said I'm the only one that's available for like for like an hour or so. And so I need to be able to handle that type of medicine. And that's
Mm.
kind of like formed me into the doc that I am. It was like I should be able to handle a lot of this stuff on my own and only rely on a specialist when it's outside of my wheelhouse. But even then, I want to use them for a little bit, figure out what's going on, then bring them back in. So that way I'm still kind of helping control the patient's medication. They're just not jumping around between different people, getting different answers, not knowing what to do.
It's interesting. I think it's good for people to know because, as I said, there are people out there who are like that friend of mine who probably have that question. Well, how do I pick a doctor? You can look at their website, you can look at their social media if they have it, you can ask people, you can get an appointment. But even then, how do you make that decision? And I think just for people who are listening to this, they're getting who are trying to make that decision, they're getting to know you a little bit better and understand what kind of options that they have. And I think that's it's important because it's hard to make it's easy to sign a consent form, but it's hard to make informed consent if
Mm-hmm.
you're not informed. You know what I mean? And I don't think reading a piece of paper is usually enough to have informed consent. And it's not enough to make an informed decision. And social media and websites aren't enough to make informed decisions. And there's a lot of people out there who say, well, I do my own research. And unfortunately, there are algorithms right now that push you certain things. And so you may think that you're getting this balanced research. And unless you are actively circumventing those algorithms or you know how to read research, you can actually go on PubMed. And I think people who read research a lot of times don't understand the complication. They'll say, well, I read this study, and well, you didn't look at the methods. It's not a very big sample size. It's not, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not like you don't understand. Like you can read the intro, you can read the discussion, but the nuance of it, you don't really pick up on it. And then you have to look at the totality of the research, really, because one study doesn't just give you all the information. And because of all of that, it's technically really hard to do your research. It's time consuming. There is a knowledge gap, an experience level. And so it's nice to be able to hear physicians speak a little bit more about some of these things to get their idea on how they would address certain things. And I'd like to turn back to the autism topic because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's something the whole Trump's whole campaign, bringing on RFK Jr. and with his background, that's just been it's been a big topic and it's super controversial. And I come from a healthcare community as a chiropractor that has historically and still many people and right now take a strong stance, an anti-vaccine stance.
Mm-hmm.
And just speaking as a profession that doesn't have it within our scope of practice to administer vaccines, I always find that inappropriate. Everyone's entitled to their own beliefs, but I feel like people out there who love their chiropractors and they're getting vaccine advice from their chiropractor, I would encourage you not to do that because we understand the mechanisms of vaccines and that's it. Like the education stops there, and maybe some people did some weekend seminars here and there, but it's really not within our scope of practice. And so I understand the anti-vaccine side of the fence. And I think regardless of what side of the fence you sit on, it's worth it to look at the other side and see, well, what are their points? So from the pro-vaccine standpoint, they're looking at it as a public health issue. If people are not vaccinated, it is a public health problem or potentially a public health problem.
Mm-hmm.
And they will say, well, these are the people who might push for vaccine mandates. So they're going to tell you what you should do with your body and with your kids' bodies because it's for the good of society. It's public health.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, even if you're anti-vaccine, I don't think it's hard to see that perspective. But from the anti-vaccine side of it, it is still a public health issue because you're telling me what to do with my body. So it's like, it's my health, and I'm part of the public. And I think if you're very pro-vaccine, I don't think it's hard to see that perspective. But I honestly feel like most people live somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
They see both sides. They're not pro or anti. They just want to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And they want healthy kids. And the idea that they could do something to their child that could permanently affect their life, I think is terrifying. It is as a parent, because you don't know. Am I about to consent to something that's going to have a huge effect on my child's future? That's really scary. And I feel like when you get into a scary topic, it's really easy to provoke people into arguing, and it's really easy to scare people into making decisions or not making decisions, depending on how you want to manipulate the narrative. So how do you navigate, as a primary care physician, how do you navigate these questions? Because I'm sure you have newborns come in, I'm sure you have pregnant mothers, and I'm sure that they ask you these questions and that they have these concerns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so all right, we're going into the vaccine debate now. That's always fun conversation. Um, so my let me see, get my thought processes real quick. So yeah, if I have a mother that comes in and they have concerns about vaccines, kind of similar to what we were talking about with the whole Tylenol thing. It's like, okay, what vaccines are you worried about? What ones do you want to get? Is it that your primary care doctor says that we need to get all of these done, all of these different vaccines done at one time, or is it a specific vaccine that they're worried about? Biggest thing for me is just again educating patients on like vaccines and what they're doing. I think vaccines are a novel idea where you're basically putting something in the body to give the body more of a response to it, to help protect it down the road. Is the way that they're doing vaccines nowadays that beneficial? If you can say look at the research, but I mean again, research can be tailored to whatever you want it to be. Um, and so yeah, so my thing is educating patients and being like, okay, well, what are your concerns with this? And then kind of going from that because like I mean, and again, looking at things from both sides. You have one side that says the research has shown that vaccines are safe and effective, but then you have the other side that says like, well, I have experience with like one of my kids had a severe reaction to one of the vaccines. Um, I really don't like the phrase when they say vaccines are safe and effective because there's no medication that's safe and effective. Everything has side effects associated with it, unfortunately. And so when we have that, and if even if you look at like the vaccine like things that the vaccine ingredient and the safety panels, it says that there are risks of adverse reactions from a vaccine. And generally, it's just a little bit of fever and like irritation at the injection site, but there's still stuff that can go on with that. And so that's my thing is like there is always a potential for a reaction, but like do the benefits outweigh the risks of what we're trying to do here?
Hmm. How strong do you think the link is between vaccines and autism?
Oh, that's a hard topic to go with. And again, it's hard to tell because we're not going to be able to uh, do that like straight up. There are studies out there that will show that and so I guess I'll take a step backward. My concern isn't necessarily with an individual vaccine. It's with an accumulation of it's a number of vaccines at one time because you don't have studies out there that are showing that like the MMR vaccine with the hepatitis vaccine with the chickenpox vaccine. There's nothing that's comparing all of those three together that will say if there's any adverse events. There's a few retrospective studies coming out right now that are comparing the amount of like the prevalence of autism or the incidence of autism with the current vaccine schedule, and there is some concerning stuff that's coming out with that. But again, research can be tailored, so it's one of those things that's like Me personally, I think that not giving a ton of vaccines to a child that doesn't have a fully developed immune system is probably not the smartest thing to do. Um, don't want to say the smartest thing, but it's probably not the safest thing to do. And it's better to kind of space those out if that's what that person wants to do.
Okay. So respecting the choices of the parent, addressing their concerns,
Yeah.
and then mitigating risk by not overloading a developing immune system with a battery of foreign substances within a short period of time. I think that, and again, that's the nuance that we don't get from social media,
Mm-hmm.
and from clickbait kind of things. Because I go back to, I think regardless of your political opinion or any of your opinions for anyone listening to this, I think we could all probably agree that the healthcare system in the United States needs some work. I don't think anyone's going to defend it. It's not all bad, and there are definitely some changes that need to be made. The argument, though, are what are those changes? Like, how do we actually make those shifts? And I think the Maha crew has their own perspective. It seems like the strength of Maha is that they're identifying issues that need to be fixed. And I think everyone can agree on that. The controversy is how they want to go about it. And I don't know that we can necessarily say they're right or wrong, because it's hard to say, like, is a vaccine good or bad? Well, it's probably both, or it could be both, and I think there are very few things that are good or bad, because it's kind of a spectrum and it depends on the individual. But I wonder, I worry about how politics affects medicine. But it's kind of interesting talking to you because you don't deal with insurance. So you're kind of removed. You're not totally removed because you still have a license, and there's a lot that goes along in there. There's things that you can and can't do. But you're not beholden to what insurance companies say, and then the politics behind that. And I feel like that is, from a pharmaceutical and a political standpoint, if you want to manipulate something, you can manipulate the insurance company is the easiest way to do it, because insurance sets reimbursements. So it's like, oh, you want to get paid? Well, here's what you're going to do. You know what I mean? And so you want to stay in business, you want to feed your family as a doctor. Here are the standards that you will adhere to. And so it's kind of easy to manipulate a group of people when you control their financial outcome.
Oh yeah.
Without directly walking into their office and telling them what to do. So and that's why I love your opinion on this, because it is truly your opinion. You're not saying what you need to say in order to get paid. Yep. You've stepped out of that system and you practice the way you want to practice because that's the way you feel. And I think a lot of people may gravitate towards that, because then the information that you're getting is the actual opinion of the physician and not what they need to do in order to get reimbursed. I don't know. I'm curious too. There's another hot topic, and I got you on here. I want to Ozempic. Ozempic is just a brand name. So the GLP-1s.
Yep.
I think, regardless of, there's some people that think it's really bad. So I've heard some people say this is the new opioid epidemic. That's just gonna, and I think that's there may be some parallels, but I think that's a little bit extreme. Although maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But the concerning thing to me about this medication and the popularity of it is not what adults do to their bodies, but it's the potential use for children. And I had, if you're just out in public and you see obese children, at a very young age, and all of the health problems that are going to come from that, I think it's a very quick fix then to say, well, let's just put them on these meds because we know it's gonna reduce body weight, and we know it's gonna help with that. But to your point, there are always side effects to medications. And then, I think right now there's another really hot topic about, letting, young kids transition to a different gender surgically. And are they really going to want that when they're adults? Or should we allow kids to make those decisions? And I don't know if GLP-1s fall into that category, but I kind of, if you have a kid who's obese and they're very young, and then you say, well, the solution to that is medication, and then those medications have long-term effects on their health, and those kids didn't really get to make that choice, but there were other ways to handle the obesity. That concerns me a little bit because as a society, we just have a tendency towards the quick fix, and Ozempic and the other brands of the GLP-1s, they seem ridiculously effective. So are you seeing more and more people want these medications in your practice and within, I'm sure you go to conferences and things like that. Like how are physicians dealing with this and talking about it?
Yeah, so how physicians are dealing with it and talking about it. I would say that again, there's two camps. There's those that say like this is the greatest thing, it's helping people lose weight and get healthier again. And then there's those that are saying like, do we really want to be using this type of medication on kids? My concern with the GLP-1 agonists is that like yes, it's helping lose weight, but what happens as soon as you stop the medication? Like the person isn't changing their lifestyle. So they're going to immediately go back to eating their foods. They're going to gain all their weight back again, which is what happens with any of these types of like, I don't know, these diet medications. And so that's my concern. And so me personally, I have had patients come in and ask me about them. And I say, I kind of have the same spiel. I'm like, what is the effect of these medications? What are these medications doing? So the main thing with weight loss medications is they are either, when you take them, they're either making you feel more full so that way you're not eating as much, or they're doing something to ramp up your metabolism to make you burn through excess calories faster. And what happens as soon as you stop taking that medication? Guess what? You're not going to be full as much and you're not going to be burning as much. And so that's why the weight comes right back on again. And so you're taking this medication for a temporary benefit, basically to further encourage an unhealthy lifestyle. And with me, it's like, why can't we just teach you to not overeat? Why can't we teach you to be a little bit more active and burn this stuff off naturally? And then I'm giving you the tools to be able to like do this down the road, like say that you fall off the wagon or your life gets really stressful, or you move to an area or certain foods just aren't quite available to you anymore. Like why can't I give you the tools to take care of this yourself rather than giving you a pill and say like, oh, this is going to fix all your problems, but as soon as that pill gets taken away, say GLP-1s down the road, it's found out, like, as it's always retrospective studies that give you more information, which is why like the diet pills on the market today aren't the diet pills that were on the market 10 years ago or 10 years before that. So like what happens when these medications get taken off the market because they find that there's more risks associated with them, and then all these people start gaining their weight back again. I'd rather give them the tools to be able to take care of that themselves.
Yeah. What are the known risks right now?
I mean, that stuff, it's actually still kind of coming out a little bit. I would say the things that are kind of the most common that you see is some people get pretty extreme hair loss as a result of taking GLP-1s. There's been a little bit of information coming out with just cardiac type of stuff, mostly just by putting a little bit additional stress on the heart can kind of exacerbate underlying like heart conditions that may not have been noticed before. But I mean, it's let's see, GLP-1s have only been used for this for like last couple of years. Typically, it's about 10 years before they're actually bringing the other information out. So I'd say probably about 5 years from now, we'll really truly know what some of the risks are.
And that's terrifying for people who are going all in on it right now, because we don't we don't know. And I think from a parent standpoint, that would be terrifying as well, because if you're making that choice right now in 5 to 10 years, if your kid has an issue that it you can't rewind time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just such a scary thing as a parent to make these decisions. But I don't, no one's asked me about it, but I just wonder, because they're becoming so popular that in some areas it's hard for people to get them. So you might have someone who's morbidly obese, has heart disease, and is diabetic, and a physician it says, we got to put you on this med to save your life. And maybe that's an appropriate use for that person, but then it's hard. I've heard stories where it's actually challenging for that person to get the medication, because it's being used as a cosmetic thing for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got these off-brand things coming up out of nowhere that may or may not be safe. And so, if you look around and you see children who are struggling, because you've got children now who are obese and diabetic and have these issues, and a parent might look at that and say, well, this medication is safe, and there are no side effects that are that serious, and I'm going to put my child on it. I think it's important to know that, to your point, that that this information will change over time, and we may not know as much now as we will in the future, and we may not want to make these choices now without all of the information, because there are other alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like people, if you're like, hey, diet and exercise, a lot of people are going to roll their eyes and, well, yeah, obviously. But, there are so many different ways to address nutrition and exercise. I think sometimes people have a negative view in their mind. It's like, oh, I'm only going to be eating lettuce and I'm going to be running 10 miles a day. And it's like, no, sometimes it's just adding in some more fiber initially and going on a walk, or you know what I mean, like, or switching from soda, like, to diet soda initially, to try and I hang out and work and co-manage with a registered dietitian a lot, Denise Levenger, and she's got all these tricks and tips. Obviously there would be the ideal thing for people to do, but a lot of times that's not doable or feasible for them at the time. And if you can make small changes over a long period of time, they can have really big effects for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think people look at diet and exercise and lifestyle changes as this, like, Mount Everest that's just impossible to climb.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, yeah, the overall thing that you're trying to accomplish is going to be really challenging and take a long time, but the first step isn't going to be that challenging. And the second step might not be that challenging. And if you just kind of go step by step, you might actually eventually get to the top of the mountain with very little discomfort, because you've kind of made those slow progressive changes. Is that something in the office, if someone comes in and they say, well, I have a question about GLP-1s, I think I want to go on these meds, and you present an alternative, do you help people with that process to walk that path?
Yes, 100%. And I would say, even if somebody was going to be on GLP-1s, they need to be with somebody that's going to still walk with them along those steps, because it's not like you take this medication, you go off on your own. You want, like, these people need to be monitored by a physician, especially the more obese, the more medical, more other comorbidities they have. They need to be monitored to make sure that they're not putting an undue stress on their system, and they can tolerate, like, medication side effects and stuff like that. But going back to, like, if I have a patient that comes in, the biggest thing is not making a ton of changes at one time, because if I just try to tell them just to do all this different stuff, they're going to try it, do it, and then burn out because it's too hard to do. But it's like what you said, we want to make little steps here and there, little changes, and educate, so that way they know exactly what they're doing. Um, so for me, I first thing I do is I try and just tell my patients is just like, well, I know you think that you just need to eat iceberg lettuce and not get any calories in your diet, when actually it's found out that that calorie counting and calorie restriction is not the best way to go, because if you're decreasing your calories, your body's going to adapt to the number of calories that you're eating, and so you might get some weight loss initially, but it's not going to be that continued thing. So we want to make sure that we're supporting your body and helping it helping it in that process of getting healthier and losing weight.
dietary recommendations, that's a whole nother rabbit hole I don't even want to go down, because it's like, that is just, I I teach a health class at the college, and um, I do one main lecture on nutrition. I do little lectures, like we talk about importance of protein and fiber and things like that, but I do one
Hmm.
main lecture on nutrition, and it's just 50 minutes of watching ridiculous social media clips about just just and I pick on, I try and be like a good stand-up comedian where I pick on everything. So I
Yeah.
make fun of vegans and carnivore, because like all of these dietary patterns seem to be healthy for some people, or for at least for a brief period of time there can be some
Mhm.
benefit to them. And depending on who you are, you might not be as worried about the side effects. So for example, if someone is, I don't know, they have epilepsy, and going on a carnivore diet helps them not have seizures every day. And you're like, yeah, well, in 20 years you might have heart disease. They're like, well, I don't care because I'm not having a seizure right now. So, they may be well aware of that risk, but for them, that's a good choice. And then someone who has risk of heart disease, they may want to go more towards a vegan diet, and that really works well for them. And they're well aware of, it's going to be maybe harder to get the complete amino acid profile, but they're willing to work with that. So
Mhm.
I think every diet probably has some merit to it and can be good, and most diets are better than the standard American diet. So making any shift for most people is probably a good shift, but it's the tactics used to say this is the best diet
Mhm.
and everything else is deadly, you know?
Yeah.
Because a carnivore influencer will look at broccoli and tell you why it's toxic.
Yes.
And and it's just kind of like, well, yeah, technically you're manipulating the research to say that,
Mhm.
but you know, it who is dying of broccoli overdose? Like, who's getting a sunburn realistically because they're eating so much celery? It's
Mhm.
who's eating so much spinach that they're having kidney failure and kidney stones. It just doesn't happen
Yes.
very very often. And but on the flip side, you know, uh, a hardcore vegan is going to have you so scared to eat animal protein, and they're going to have some science to back it up. And it's just they take these extreme views, and I feel like when you when I talk to someone about diet, they get so turned off quickly because what they're hearing is, oh, you want to judge me, and you want
Mhm.
to restrict what I eat, and you want to judge what my parents fed me, and you want to judge what I feed my kids, and you want to judge what I do at night when nobody's looking. And and then whatever vision in their mind of a diet they have, whether it's just like, oh, I can't eat carbs anymore apparently, and I love carbs, or I'm not going to be able to eat the stuff I want to eat, and it's just they have a vision in their head, and it's not the vision that I have. It's just so
Mhm.
hard to communicate. And I would imagine, as a physician, when people are coming to you, with these maybe issues that are related to that, they're related to lifestyle stuff, they're related to lack of physical activity, and they're related to nutrition, and they're related to a lot of these things. From my end, I deal with the pain aspect, but that's it for the most part. And I hope that what I do has positive effects on their health. But people are coming to you saying, I think I have a heart problem, or I think my cholesterol is this, or I might be diabetic.
Mhm.
So you've got to go deeper and not just hope that what you do has an effect. That is your job to have that effect.
Mhm.
How do you, if you've got someone and you're thinking lifestyle change, diet, I know they don't want to hear it. How do you even approach that subject? I'm curious
Mm.
because I might steal your
Mhm.
tactic.
So I'm going to go back to education. So I start by talking to my patients about, well, I'll review their labs, talk about different things, show how like certain parts of their body are not adapting well or not functioning as well, especially with like diabetes or something like that. And so if they're talking about like, I want to fix my diet, I certainly don't go the route of like, oh, you need to go plant-based or you need to go carnivore. I really educate on macronutrients. And so I talk about their proteins, their fats, and their carbohydrates. And I try to dispel myths and rumors about certain things with that and try to clean it up a little bit more and just try to like show them, kind of like sift through all of the data that's out there that could kind of steer them one way or the other. And so when I tell them, I was like, okay, there's proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Those are our macronutrients. Proteins are a structural source for our body. Carbohydrates are a fuel source for our body. Fat is kind of dual purpose. It can be used for structural parts of the body, building cells, making hormones, or it can be used as an energy source. And so for you, if you are obese or you're a diabetic and you want to lose weight, well, what's the fuel source that's getting basically stored as fat to be used as that multi-purpose type of thing? I was like, and so my big goal is like, yo, yeah, carbohydrates are a big issue. Is that something that we need? If they're a diabetic, then yes, carbohydrates are certainly something that we need to address because your body's not processing carbohydrates all that well. If they're just obese, then it's like, okay, what are ways that we can change the ratios of these nutrients in order to kind of put you more promote weight loss type of thing? And that's my initial step is that. But again, each patient gets a different speech based off of what they're coming in on. I like cookie cutter medicine is not a way to practice patients. You need to treat the patient in front of you.
That's awesome. I think that's a good way to end it, actually, because I think that kind of sums up what your practice is about. I'm going to link all of your contact info in the description of this.
Okay.
So if anyone is listening or watching this at any point and you want to reach out to Dr. Mueller, you'll be able to get a hold of him. And if you can't find that, just contact me and I'll give you his contact info. And yeah, thanks for your time this morning. I appreciate you coming on.
Oh, you're very welcome. This was fun. Appreciate it.